VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at VCYAmerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today, and we have a stemwinder of a program. And as you have been listening to the news channels and watching the news channels all over, this place is abuzz, this world is abuzz with what's been happening. There used to be a TV show called As the World Turns. Well, as we see some of the chicanery and the mischief going on, we'd say as the world burns, because the issue of truth in many cases is absolutely non-existent. And people that we put our trust in and faith in, and those who have pledged to be truthful, we're finding out in very clear language that they're not being truthful to us. And deception seems to be the theme of the day. Before we go into our show and introduce our guest, I want to share this with you. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, I was involved with a Christian school that we were a part of. And during those years, there was an effort by the IRS to monitor what they called were white academies. They made this an issue, that there was discrimination and that these nonprofit academies were white flight academies and were out to literally discourage many of the private or Christian schools that were around. Well, I had a phone call from my good friend John McClario, an attorney, in fact, the attorney who incorporated this organization way back in the 50s. And he said, Vic, I think we need to go to Washington and testify before the Internal Revenue Service that Christian schools are not a white flight institution, but they are a qualified, bona fide ministry that is not racially oriented. Well, we went to Washington. I'll never forget, that was my first trip on a 727. We went to this auditorium where it had about 1,500 seats. The place was abuzz. On the platform were about 5 or 6 people who were from the Internal Revenue Service. In fact, if I recall correctly, a man by the name of Kurtz was on the platform who was pretty high up in the IRS. We walked to a podium, each individual who had the chance to speak, of which there were hundreds. The little green light on the console indicated we could start talking, and as we would have 5 minutes total, we would read our statements, and then as you came to 1 minute before your time was up, an amber light would come on. You would talk, and if you went 1 second beyond it, a red light would shut your microphone off. Well, we shared our views, we shared our thoughts, and as we shared them, I looked over, and most of the 6 people on the platform weren't even listening to us, but were busy talking and laughing and whatever. At the end of the day, they claimed that the transcript stacked on the floor, sheet by sheet, stood about 7 feet tall because of the thousands of pages that had been brought there. Folks, when I on the way back, I said, John, I will not be surprised if VCY and our school are not audited. Within 4 weeks, we had a call from the Internal Revenue Service, and they called and said, we're going to do a 3-year audit. They called like on a Thursday or early Friday and said, we'd like to have all of your information, donor lists, everything they requested, sounds similar, and then your board minutes, everything that you have for the past 3 years, and we'd like to do a walkthrough on Friday afternoon, which they did, and then they said, we'll be back Monday morning to do the audit. Well, folks, the man came in on Friday afternoon, walked through the school, and found that we were 40% integrated. There were Hispanics and black teachers and a mixture that was well representative of the community. And he began to find fault. He said, well, what makes you think your school is better than the public schools? I said, well, mister, we're not perfect. But I'll promise you one thing, we're not having sex in the hallways and drugs in the lockers. He came downstairs and walked into the very room I'm sitting in, which happened to have a broadcast console, a microphone, and he said, what's this? He pulled a little book from his pocket. And he looked at this, and I said, well, sir, this is our broadcast studio. We happen to have a radio station, 38,000 watts here in the city, and we broadcast across the state. He said, well, I don't see anything here that said you have a radio station, but I'll put it down. He left, went back to his office, and he said, we'll see you Monday morning. Monday morning at 8 o'clock, the phone rang. This is the Internal Revenue Service calling to notify you that there will be no audit. I said, really, sir? We've prepared. We've got all the minutes and everything ready for you. We've gone to a lot of effort. Why? Well, he said, to put it as the way my boss said it, he said, if they've got a radio station, don't edit them. Now, folks, that's what we ran into back in the early 80s. Today, we have a man who's been monitoring this and has much to say, a man who's close to where it's happening. His name is Scott Wheeler. He's been heard on the Fox News Channel, MSNBC, CNN, CNBC, CBS, and others, a host of others. He's an author, writing a book promoting Decline, Obama versus America. Also the author of Shadow Government, What Obama Doesn't Want You to Know About His Czars. And I say, welcome, Scott Wheeler. It's a privilege to have you with us today.
Vic, it's great to be with you.
Sorry about taking my little story in the first part of the program, but this
thing was pretty funny, honey. It's kind of like the old story about you don't go after a man who buys ink by the barrel. Don't go after a guy with a microphone.
Well, it bewildered me, because why was it that this radio station brought such fear to the IRS?
Well, I think that typical of government bureaucracy, they fear exposure. Well, I shouldn't say government bureaucracy, but corrupt government bureaucracy fears exposure. And when they have exposure, like we're seeing a little bit of right now at this moment, then people become interested and angry and upset. At that time, back in the 80s, it was a lot easier to galvanize people because there was not the excessive or too much information out there now that kind of drowns out important messages. And so if things started getting out, people became angry and they took action and they demanded answers from their representatives. As I've said many times to a lot of my conservative friends, they say, look how polite Ronald Reagan was to the Democrats. And I said, but this, it was a different time. In those days, people read, they understood what Reagan was saying. You didn't have to say this person's extremely corrupt and they're anti-American. Then you simply had to explain what they believed in the politest of terms, and people got it. They understood it. Today, the Democrats have coarsened the language, the political language, that is, to the degree that our only defense is to tell the truth about them. What we've seen in the past since probably 92 is that the Democrats have gotten away with making up lies about conservatives and then politicizing the lies and holding hearings and creating a stain that has lasted, that lasts for years over something that's not true. Meanwhile, we've neglected to hold them accountable for things that they've really done, serious things.
Scott, you're a former television producer and investigative journalist. You focused on domestic, international security issues, produced and consulted many television documentaries, and also understand you're an old friend of mine who's now since passed on, but Marlon Maddox, a guy who in those early days of the 80s, we worked together.
I remember Marlon well. He was such a sweetheart of a guy, and I'd been a guest on his show many, many times. In fact, one of the national security scandals that I referenced earlier when I was a television producer, I produced several documentaries on Clinton decontrolling strategic technology to China while he was receiving illegal donations from communist Chinese operatives. Marlon, he held show after show after show on that subject, and I was a frequent guest, and he really believed and understood that we had to call attention to that. And I think if it hadn't been for Marlon and our work, we would never have had the Cox Committee hearings.
May I say this, Scott? Last night, about 11 o'clock, I got the word about you possibly being available. And today, when I got the confirmation, I was so glad that you could be with us. Because our topic today is Benghazi, the Constitution, and high crimes and misdemeanors. Where do we pick this thing up?
Well, it's a huge story, and as chance would have it, I had worked on a case involving Libya years ago, back in the late 1990s. I worked undercover as an arms dealer, an American arms dealer. We videotaped and caught all kinds of middlemen from Libya and Germany trafficking weapons and technology that Libya at the time was forbidden from obtaining. And what we discovered in 1998 and 99 through this investigation was that Libya had a weapons of mass destruction program. And at that time, I took it to the CIA and told the United States Customs Strategic Investigations. They kind of dismissed it. They were dismissive. They were interested. They said, "What you've got is a real investigation," but this is a direct quote from U.S. Customs Strategic Investigations. They said, it takes us 2 weeks to write a memo to get permission to do something like this.
Oh, good grief.
And so, of course, this was pre-9/11, and so it was a different era. But we made the point, we reported it in 1999, that Libya had a weapons of mass destruction program. We were laughed at by the career intelligence bureaus generally, and not all of them. Some people took it very seriously. And then, of course, 4 years later, Libya declared their weapons of mass destruction program and wanted to become an ally of the United States and participate in the world again, which took Gaddafi, who was a very evil guy in general, to something of an ally. Gaddafi was not an extremist like Osama bin Laden. In fact, Gaddafi requested the first Interpol warrant on Osama bin Laden, and so he feared the extremists in the Islamic community, and so he was. What I say may make him sound like he's a good guy, and he's not. But he was not. He was one of the better ones of the bad guys, and he was cooperating and assisting us in finding some of the radicals. So it was kind of surprising when Obama turned on him, and so quickly. In other words, if you look at how they're handling Syria, it's been going on for a year and a half, and they haven't really taken any action. And there is probably more at stake in Syria than there ever was in Libya. Libya is an isolated North African country. Syria borders Israel, and also is in the vicinity of borders Iran on one side.
We're going to take a break, Scott. That's a hard break. I can't change that, but we'll be right back in 60 seconds as we follow the growth of this situation. Our guest today is Scott Wheeler, a man who's been in touch with what's going on here for some time. Don't go away. Stay right there. We'll be right back.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how come we find so many dinosaur fossils?
You know, Chris, we don't find all that many dinosaur fossils. We only find them in a few places worldwide, and then when we do find them, there's likely to be a lot of dinosaur fossils buried together. Usually they're not complete dinosaurs all put together, just a piece of one bone is found. The dinosaur skeletons are nowhere to be found. Any type of fossil needs rapid burial to protect the carcass from scavengers and bacterial action. It has to be buried rapidly away from these agents. Burial occurs in water-deposited sediments. I think the best understanding of this is that the dinosaurs died and were buried by the great flood of Noah's day. The flood we read about back in Genesis is the reason we find any dinosaur fossils at all.
To find out more about creation science, visit us on the web at www.icr.org. That's www.icr.org.
And welcome back to Crosstalk. Today we're talking with Scott Wheeler, a man who's an investigative reporter, a man who has produced videos, documentaries involved with journalism, dealing with the issues in our international security issues. We're going to be going right back to him in just a moment. Remember, our topic today, Benghazi, the Constitution, high crimes and misdemeanors. And folks, this thing is heating up more and more every day. And the question is, where is it going to go from here? And the question is, what will America do about this as well? Scott, welcome back.
Thanks, Vic. It's good to be with you again.
Yes.
So when we last left, we were talking about how Obama's handling of Syria, allowing this brutal, what Hafez al-Assad, or what Assad has learned from the Libya experience is, if you're more brutal, the more brutal you are, the more chance you have at staying in power. And what Obama did in Libya was take action fairly quickly. We began arming rebels. Well, at that time, I, on national TV a number of times, on Fox and on CBN and other places, was warning that a lot of these rebels we're arming are al-Qaeda, that they are al-Qaeda affiliates coming from other parts of Africa, and that there was a danger here. They hated Gaddafi because he had was not an extremist. They considered him an infidel, and they were after him. And so when we started giving aid and support to the Libyan rebels, some of them were not extremists, were not terrorists, but some of them were. And so we actually armed the rebels, the terrorists that ultimately assaulted our Benghazi compound, or the chances are good that they were armed by our own government. I don't say that in a sense that there's a huge scandal there. The fact that weapons are flying left and right in that environment, you can criticize that as bad policy, but I would not say that there's a scandal insofar as they were intentionally armed the wrong people. Mm-hmm. That's what happens when you try to fund and supply an insurgency. You don't know where this stuff ends up. You know where you might have moderate contacts and people that you're trying to form an alliance with when they take over the government, but you don't. You have no control over where it goes. And so clearly bad policy to begin with. Why were we opposing Gaddafi at that point? He had come to our side. He had come over to and there's some interesting backgrounds between Obama and Gaddafi, too. I cover that in my book, Promoting Decline, Obama versus America. I don't reach any conclusions about it, but there are some strange things. There were some strange things back in 2008 that no one ever asked Obama about, nobody ever got to the bottom of, but it's certainly out there. Anyway.
Where can they get your book?
You can get it on Amazon.com, or you can order a copy at GOPtrust.com, which is the website for the National Republican Trust PAC. And I think the Trust PAC has it cheaper than Amazon. So if you go there, you can the proceeds go to help defeat left-wing Democrats. So,
Scott, in some of the things that you've published here, you're talking about the very fact that the president launched an illegal war. That the interesting statements you have here. After launching an illegal war, the president called John Boehner to inform him of his actions without any pretense.
Again, very strange. He was operating under the congressional approval that allowed President Bush to comport the war on terror, and so that was probably a mistake to create this umbrella that you can call virtually any action in the Middle East part of the war on terror, and Obama has certainly taken advantage of that. And why Libya when Gaddafi was cooperating with the United States? That, to this day, makes no sense to me, and president's never had to answer for that. Why would he overthrow the Libyan president? At some point, if it had gone on and on, there might have been at some point where you calculate and say, well, we're going to have to do business with the rebels, and you might you might at some point, from a national security standpoint, need and diplomatic reasons, have to change sides, but for crying out loud, why do it so early on in that war when Gaddafi clearly could have reestablished himself?
When you look at the overall pattern of lawlessness or violating principle or policy, I mean, in your writings, you said Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta let the cat out of the bag when during questioning by Jeff Sessions about the lack of congressional authority or authorization on the Libyan war. I mean, whatever he did has raised the ire of so many. And as we see this going from what happened there, we talk about Benghazi, violation of the Constitution, and we talk about high crimes and misdemeanors. Where is this thing going?
Well, what I have been writing recently is that this is an impeachable offense, and the reason I think it is the most impeachable is because there is so much videotape and there is so much evidence that implicates the president himself that he cannot get out of. Like, as I was saying to you in the break, that here's videotape of the president telling a lie that he knows is a lie, and he has no wiggle room to go back and say, well, what I actually said was this, what I actually meant was, or this was the information available at the time. We now know what information was available at the time, and we know that he willingly ignored information from the people who provided it, the intelligence services, and came up with a different story. We know that they actively deployed government resources to help protect the lie and help create this Potemkin village, or as I'm calling it now, a Potomac village, whereby they acted like they believed the lie. And when I say they acted like it, I'm speaking of like Hillary Clinton saying to the father of one of the dead Navy SEALs, we're going to get this guy who made this video. That is a statement that she made knowingly that was a lie, but creating the impression that they believed the lie themselves. And that's what is so bizarre and what I think is so impeachable about this event. We had a national security disaster. The fact that Obama was running on his national security record in the 2012 election, he couldn't run on his domestic record, that makes him, at least to that degree, illegitimately elected. People did not know the facts and did not know the truth when they went to the polls. Well, that happens frequently in elections, but in this case, they did not know the facts because the President of the United States used the power of government to suppress and distort and deny facts to the American people that they were entitled to know before voting in November.
You know, as we follow this, and I was just listening to Fox over the lunch hour as well, continuing the pressure cooker pressures getting higher and higher here with the intensity of the departure from truth and the enhancement of error to the place where my big question is, where is the outrage? Is it starting to occur? For so long, it's been apathy.
Well, it has been, and after the election, I think many Republicans, many conservatives, and Christians in America have been extremely, and conservative Jews as well, have been extremely apathetic and just fed up. Some of them had the attitude of let Obama destroy the country, and at least the ones who put him in office will also suffer. People were disgusted. They were angry at Republicans for not fighting harder, and they had every reason to be angry at Republicans because they haven't fought. That was one of the reasons I started the National Republican Trust Pact, because we take strong action. We don't, we don't tread lightly. And for example, in the 2008 election, we produced the Jeremiah Wright ad that put that story on the radar screen and earned me a lot of scorn from my former media colleagues. We did the 2010 Ground Zero Mosque ad that was banned from the networks, that got a lot of news coverage because of the point we made, and I think we stemmed the tide of that Ground Zero mosque. That caused many other organizations to investigate, and it's now, I think, slowed the process and maybe even will eventually end it. And now I'm working on an ad for Benghazi that we want to deploy nationwide and help increase people's understanding and awareness that how serious this matter is. The President of the United States actively engaged in promoting lies, not only to its own citizens, but to lawmakers and to the international community. It may have led to greater threats against Americans. It certainly led to the guy who made this Muhammad film being locked up. He still sits in jail in Texas to this day. And as one political pundit said, that he may be the first Western prisoner put in jail for offending the Prophet Muhammad. If we can possibly imagine that it's going to go more that direction, but it is. This is one of the most bizarre events in the history of this country, to have the President of the United States engage in such a high-level cover-up and distortion and deception. It's downright scary. If we let him get away with this, if we do not hold him accountable, then we will see worse happen.
Let me ask you this, Scott, because we're coming up on a break here shortly, but what needs to be done to bring this to a point of dealing with the problem? Because everybody's wringing our hands. We see the mess that's there, but somebody, we understand, or people should understand, that impeachment is only the investigative process. That's by bringing whatever the issue is for examination through Congress. Then, after the impeachment process, then the decision has to be made to what to do with the findings, correct?
That is correct. And I believe that in this case, we have enough facts to say, I would say flat out, that we have enough to convict the president just based on what we already know, what he has already lied about. There's enough evidence to say that what he did was not only wrong, it was unlawful, and it was unbecoming of the president, and it is grounds for removal from office.
You know, folks, there's a lot of difference between what happened in Watergate and what's happening today. The question is the fabric of our nation, is the courage and the substance of American concern sufficient to deal with this? We're going to be right back in just a moment, again visiting with our guest, Scott Wheeler. And in a few moments, we'll give you a chance to call in and add your thoughts as well, as this is Crosstalk coming your way on the VCY America Radio Network. Invite a friend. And by the way, for those in our immediate area, this show will re-air again tonight at 8 p.m. And, of course, it will be archived on the VCY website, vcyamerica.org. We'll be right back.
Marital conflict is increasing in our society. The commitment made to love and to cherish, sadly, is being discarded in many relationships. In 2012, a feature-length film was produced, which presents true commitment in marriage. Amazing Love is the story about a youth director and his wife, who take 5 teens from their youth group to the wilderness for 2 nights to camp out. 2 teen girls have a sharp argument that causes division. Tensions are high. The youth leader gathers all the kids and decides to tell the story of Hosea. Using flashback, the film takes you to Nazareth as the story of Hosea unfolds. It's a story of commitment, of keeping vows before God, of faithfulness and unconditional love. The DVD, Amazing Love, is available for a donation of $18 to VCY America. The story will impact teens and adults alike. To obtain this feature-length film, call 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
And welcome back to Crosstalk, as we're visiting today with Mr. Scott Wheeler. He is a man that has been involved in investigative reporting for years. He frequently appears on Fox News Channel, on MSNBC, CNN, CNBC, CBS, and a host of others, and is the author of the book Promoting Decline, Obama versus America, and also the book Shadow Government, What Obama Doesn't Want You to Know About His Czars. Available on Amazon, or what is the other site, again, your regular site?
GOPtrust.com.
And the books, I think you'll find very, very revealing. Well, we're going to open our phone lines because some of you would like to ask some questions. Our phone number is now open at 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Your reactions about what's happening in the media. Folks, you're listening to it. Everywhere you turn, they're talking about Benghazi, about the Constitution, and high crimes and misdemeanors. All of this stuff, folks, is a part of reality. This is not just a bad dream. It's happening right now. So we'd like your reactions as well. Our phone number, again, is toll-free, 800-733-9829. As we go back to our guest, Scott Wheeler. Scott, as you've seen, you've produced these videos, you're a television producer as well. I think the thing that concerns me, and I've been doing talk shows since the 70s, is the apathy of American people, or even the question, okay, we're concerned, what do we do next? What do we do now? Because we hear about impeachment, but who's going to start the process? We hear about examinations. Who is it going to be raising the issue?
Well, now you're getting into political tactics, and here's where we come in. We can make, first of all, Republicans feel emboldened to take strong action and make strong statements about these matters, but especially Benghazi. When they know the people are behind them, they will be bolder. The Democrats, if they feel the heat, if they know they're going into next year's election with baggage from Obama, they will want to get rid of him as well. And so our strategy is bifurcated. We want to bolster Republican support for impeachment and get them making stronger statements while simultaneously terrifying the Democrats from a political standpoint of losing their seat if they don't get on board and start demanding answers from this White House, which is stonewalled and delayed. It will happen if people get mad enough, and if their congressmen and senators feel the heat, they will take strong action.
You know, I've been hearing on some of the major conservative networks, and Fox especially, people who are Democrats who legitimately have realized suddenly this ship is heading for the rocks.
Yes, and they will, like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Once they realize that it's going down, they will jump. And that's what we have to do from a political tactic standpoint is we have to make Democrats, we have to raise awareness, we have to make them feel surrounded, that everybody's mad about this, and if they don't do something, if they try to stonewall like they did in last week's hearings, then they're going to pay a price for it. They're going to lose their election. They're going to they're going to have their power stripped from them by the people. If they feel that, they will turn on Obama because they are, more than anything else, self-interested, of course.
We have people all across the country. Our lines are lighting up here in the studio, and I know they want to talk with you and would like to talk with each other as well. Now, the big question as we're talking about this is what can individuals do, regardless of your political party? If you are concerned, I mean, let's face it, we're in a nosedive. We're losing altitude fast. We look at our economy, and those within the structure can see the handwriting on the wall unless there is something done to take our country back. And people and all different persuasions are concerned. Right now we've got Bob in South Dakota standing by. And, Bob, you're on the air with Scott Wheeler.
Hello. I want to thank you so very, very much for your program. I listen as often as I can and pray for you and support you.
Thank you.
I guess I'm one of the Republicans who's gotten kind of lazy after the post-Obama election. I was feeling pretty upset with some of my Christian friends and relatives, Republicans who voted for Obama. I was really disappointed and to the point of really being upset. What can we do, and who can we contact? What can we say to have the most impact as far as getting that rascal out of office?
I think you're from North Dakota, right, Bob?
South Dakota.
South Dakota. You want to call your senators and your representative and let your opinion be known. And what you want to say is, we must, if we do not hold this president accountable, he will be unleashed to do whatever he pleases. And the reason we're at this point now, the reason he was able to pull this off, is because he has not been held accountable prior. The media, the press corps, which is largely dominated by, I don't call them leftists because it's less than that. If they were leftists, at least have some principles, but they're not principled. They are Democrat Party apparatchiks. There's no other way to put it. And the reason I say that is, in 1992, Bill Clinton campaigned on human rights in China, and the media made it a big point to say George H.W. Bush was a little too friendly with China. Bill Clinton gets elected and sold the Chinese government the weapons in which they used to antagonize their own people and oppress their own people, and the press didn't open their lying mouths to say a word about it. So they aren't even leftists. They aren't even liberals who care about human rights. They're Democrat Party apparatchiks. And so we have to make all of them feel afraid. If the media feels diminished because the American people don't believe them, and they go straight to the Congress and say, I want this, we want answers, and we want them now. We want to know why he's allowed to lie to the American people. The election of 2012 may be illegitimate, because we know through, of course, the IRS audits, we know that organizations that may have been able to change the direction of the election were not allowed to exercise their First Amendment rights because of this administration's actions. This is a gathering evidence to call into question the 2012 election. It may have been illegitimate because the cover-up of Benghazi and because of the IRS. These are things that could have had a dramatic effect.
Bob, thank you so much from South Dakota. We're going to move right on to Michigan. And by the way, we have some open lines, 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Some open lines available if you'd like to call right now. Ed in Michigan, you are on the air. Ed, go ahead.
Okay, I'm from Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not Michigan.
Well, our screener put down MI instead of MN. So,
right. And I have a couple questions. It's been bothering me as I was told the other day that, number one, I don't think you can impeach fraud. You only impeach a legitimate candidate, as president. That's my.
Are you saying that because he is a fraud, that he can't be impeached? Is that your assessment?
He is a Kenyan. He was born in Kenya, and he has covered up his identity. And he said the only one that has a reason to cover up their identity is if they got something to hide. And
even if that were true, though, let me point out that he is treated as a legitimate president by the course of law, and therefore can be legitimately removed through the same course of law. It's not the birth certificate stuff is irrelevant to this. And quite frankly, it's a war that has been fought over and over and to no success. And what we have to do, as I've been saying for quite a while, is fight him on what he has done as president, including breaking the law. What Republicans have failed to have sustained outrage over how he passed the health care law, which they used a method called deem and pass, which was a completely illegitimate maneuver. It was, as one CEO of a major airline said to me, it was a crime against democracy. The people did not want it. The Republicans should have kept the outrage against the health care bill, the Affordable Care Act, should have kept it high, but instead they just kind of let it sink in, and they didn't make a big deal out of it, and so people said, well, who's fighting for us?
We're going to go to Mark in Erie, Pennsylvania. Mark, you're on the air with Scott Wheeler.
Hello.
Hello, you're on the air, Mark.
Oh, hi.
Hey, Mark.
I want to thank you for your show and making the American people aware of what's going on. And just wanted to know, what is the political process in order to get an impeachment started on this president we have?
Well, the first thing that we have to do is we have to have a national outrage. We have to have people.
I think we have that.
Yeah. Well, we have it in some quarters. We've got to spread it. We've got to get even the low information voters to come out and start demanding answers. And that's the beginning of it. Then the House will have to bring up impeachment charges, and they'll form an impeachment committee, which will bring in an outside prosecutor to conduct an investigation, interview witnesses, and then determine what charges. And what I believe the charges would stem from is using government funds to deploy a lie, to actively engage in deception. That would be one of them. I think there will be others stemming from the IRS story, but my concern there is that Obama's going to come out and fire a couple of people, and they'll let the outrage on that go away.
Mark, thank you so much from Erie, Pennsylvania. We're going to go to Englewood, Florida, and Sandy. Sandy, you're on the air.
Yes, my question is, I don't understand why Obama's birth certificate would be considered irrelevant. I mean, everyone else had to prove their birth, and it's like, I don't understand it. I really would like an
let me explain it this way. First of all, others hadn't. If there had been a point in time for all other presidents at which you have to go before a committee and present your birth certificate to prove you're a natural-born citizen, then that would be one thing. You could point and say, well, what did Obama give to that committee? But there was no such committee. It's never come up before. The other thing is, and I know there are good people who disagree with me on this, and we on the right have a problem, and the problem is if you don't agree with me 100% of the time, then you're working for the other side. And we can't have that any longer. We've got to come together. But the point I've made from the beginning is his mother is a natural-born citizen. That makes him a natural-born citizen. Doesn't matter where he was born.
We'll be right back in 60 seconds. Coming down the home stretch here, this is Crosstalk. Stay tuned.
For the Worldview Weekend Minute, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewweekend.com. We're continuing our series on a biblical worldview and money, 20 points. We're on point number 11 today, which is you cannot serve God and serve money. Matthew chapter 6, verse 24 speaks to this. You will either love one and hate the other, but you can't love both, God and money. Again, money's not evil. It's the love of money that's the problem. So you can't serve God and serve money. What happens? You compromise. You end up compromising for the money. And we see many people doing that today, don't we? We see a lot of people that are in Christian ministry that compromise biblical truth to appeal to more people for the love of money. Let's not do that. Number 12, don't be anxious about material things. Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 to 31 speaks to this. Don't be anxious, but in everything make your request known to God. God is more than able to supply all of our needs. We don't need to be anxious about money.
Okay, we're coming down the speed round here, the last 8.5 minutes of the program. We're going to go to Pensacola and talk with Benjamin online. Benjamin, you're on the air with our guest, Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. I wonder if you think the press will turn against Obama for being censored, and do you think this program is being audited, and do you think the callers also are being monitored? Thank you.
Okay.
Well, that's good questions, Benjamin. First of all, there's nobody who's been more outspoken against this administration and the Clinton administration than me as a journalist, and I have had probably more scrutiny placed on me than most others. But that's part of life. The other thing is that what was the first question?
I wondered if there's being monitored, and obviously, Right Wing Watch always is posting, helping us to promote our program. So
we hope it's being monitored by a lot of people, right?
Right.
I don't think that there's reason to be concerned. Say everything, put everything on the table. That's what I always do. And in my career as a journalist, I've worked undercover inside Hamas and sent Hamas guys to jail, and I'm a pretty public person. I don't fear reprisals like a lot of people do.
Okay, we're going to go to Philip, also in Pensacola. Philip, you're on the air.
Yes, hi. I'm also from Pensacola. I'm a Republican. I receive a lot of mail supporting Republican and conservative groups. Get a lot of mail that indicates that the government is stockpiling ammunition, and that I'm wondering, with regards to the current topic, if impeachment is going to be a growing likelihood, how and could Obama institute martial law at some point?
Look, he can't. It's something that happens in banana republics, of course. We're not there yet. They do not have the manpower to impose martial law on the people of this country, and the people wouldn't take it. And as I was explaining to someone a couple of weeks ago who was saying, well, they can declare martial law. Well, they can declare anything they want to, but who's going to enforce it? They don't. We've got 300 million Americans, and 80 million of them are gun owners, which means they would have to have everybody else in the country, including every man, woman, and child, take on the 80 million gun owners. They just don't have the wherewithal, the power, or the clout to pull something like that off.
Okay, we're going to go to Susan, who is in Milwaukee. And Susan, you're on the air.
Hi. I was two things. I guess we're supposed to be calling up. When we call up, we're supposed to ask for a select group hearing. Select, how do you say it?
You can ask for a select committee. You can go right to the point and say that you believe this warrants impeachment. That we already know what the president has lied about. We already know that he has used government resources to promote and promulgate what he knew was a lie, and that is an impeachable offense. And make those points. This last election may be illegitimate. That's an important word to use. It may be illegitimate, not because of voter fraud, but because he used used government resources to mislead the American people about an important national security issue.
One of the things, and I think as we're coming down the home stretch here, that people need to know is you do have access to your government. And many of you have never, ever placed a call to the Capitol Switchboard. But if you want to talk to your senators or representatives, all you have to do is call this number, 202-224-3121 or 225-3121. It's always 202, the area code in Washington, but 202-224-3121 or 202-225-3121. Folks, be in touch with your elected officials. Art in Illinois, we got just a few seconds. You're right on the air. Go ahead, Art.
I had an idea this morning that I'd like to run past you.
Got about 30 seconds.
I'll try to walk fast. I wondered if Obama has threatened the Democratic senators enough that they are afraid to not vote against him.
Interesting question.
Well, he certainly would try to use intimidation, and he did. He has done that in the House to get Obamacare passed. He used intimidation and coercion against his own party. But keep in mind, the one thing that they fear most is not being reelected, and that's the power we have over them.
Charles in Cantonment, Florida. Go ahead, Charles.
Can y'all do that without breaking up too much?
Please, quickly, you have 30 seconds.
Hello?
Okay, I'm sorry, Charles. We only have 30 seconds left. Diana in New Lisbon, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to know what talking points are. I'm 66 years old. I never heard that term mentioned until the whole Benghazi thing.
Talking points are when you are going on the air. If you're a government official, you study the talking points. That is, you get information from in this case, you had the CIA, the Department of Defense, the Department of State, all involved, and they reconcile what their opinions of what happened are, and then they give the person who's speaking to the public those talking points so that they can say, here's what we believed happened. And in this case, the talking points that were provided to them from those agencies were not what they ultimately delivered. They changed them and turned them into something that wasn't true.
Diana, thank you for a good question. We're at the end of our program, and Scott, stick with me after we go off the air. Folks, I want to thank you for joining us today. Scott, the names of your books again.
Promoting Decline, Obama versus America, and Shadow Government, what Obama doesn't want you to know about his czars.
Either Amazon.com or
GOPtrust.com, the National Republican Trust PAC. You can get them cheaper there.
Wherever, folks, be informed. And the Bible says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And it's important to know what's going on today. Not going around in a fog, but being responsible and responsive, which means if you see something, to raise your voice and let it be heard. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
Listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Take Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.